The X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. My name is Rob McConnell, coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is Russ Reina, and we're going to be talking to Russ about his new book. It's entitled Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic and a Healer's Rebirth. Russ is a pioneer in the field of emergency medical services and co-founder of the first AFL-CIO union affiliation with EMS workers, the California Paramedics Association. He is a community leader of the world's largest online forum for EMTs and the author of Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic, a Healer's Rebirth, and two websites, Exonation, www.russreina.com, that's RUSSREINA.com, and www.firetender.org. Joining us now from Hawaii is Russ Reina. And Russ, welcome to the X-Zone.
Well, good day. How are you today, Rob?
I'm just doing great, Russ. What was the inspiration for writing your book, Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic?
Well, it was involvement in 12 years of emergency medicine as one of the very first paramedics in the country. And it rocked every aspect of my life, ways that I never anticipated happening. And I was compelled. I guess I'm a writer, and I'm stuck with that. And I was compelled to really explore it and understand my experience. And as time went on, it became more and more important for me to get the word out and have people understand what an incredible world it is working on the edge of life and death.
Now, Russ, you've been accused of being the paramedic that breaks the dangerous code of silence in the medical profession. What does this mean to you? Well,
the culture of medicine as a whole is one of silence to each other, especially when it comes to dealing with the aspects of the work that rocks your life. The things that a lot of people experience, things that they will not find anywhere else, and they don't really even know how to express these things to other people. And especially amongst themselves, if such things knock them off balance, there's no venue for them to talk about it. You can't really speak about things that rock your world because you will be perceived as someone who can't do the work, who can't just be quiet and do the work and not be emotionally, psychically, or spiritually affected by it. So breaking the code of silence is all about just talking about to me, working on the extremes, everyday things that happen to people, that people experience, the trauma, the incredible horror of other people's suffering, and also some of the psychic exposures that you go through. So many of these things are not spoken about, and it burns out a lot of medics.
Russ, you and I have to take a 2-minute commercial break. We'll be right back. X-Zone Nation, Russ Reina is our special guest. A couple of websites, www.russreina.com, that's RUSSREINA.com, and www.firetender.org. Russ is the author of Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic, A Healer's Rebirth. Both Russ and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break in 2 minutes as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, I'm going to be at the Body, Soul, Spirit Expo, May 25th to 27th at the International Center, right across the street from Pearson International Airport at 6900 Airport Road in Mississauga. www.bodysoulspiritexpo.com. We'll be back in 2. Don't go away.
Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine like hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits, and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining room can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you're visiting, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, Old Florida cuisine at its best. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Are you interested in the paranormal, ghosts, UFOs, or psychic phenomenon? Join me, Tim Bartley, co-host of Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, coming mid-January 2017 to the XZBN. We will channel spirits live and talk to them, revealing all kinds of amazing information. Spiritual attachments will be found and removed on the show, and so much more. To find out when you can listen to Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, visit www.xzbn.net for listeners on both sides of the veil.
Explanation, Russ Reina is our special guest. He's the author of Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic, A Healer's Rebirth, www.russreina.com and www.firetender.org. Russ, how does a paramedic or anyone in the emergency first responders profession deal with the high amount of stress and the personal disasters that they see on a daily basis?
The directive is you have to be ready for the next call. That the experience of the human emotions during the call often happen underneath the surface as you're doing what needs to be done in evaluating the patient and then making a determination as to what you need to do and when and how fast. All that is going on the surface, but underneath, your heart is being affected. In some cases, your heart is getting pummeled. Now, at the time, you've got to focus on the work, so that's where your complete attention is going. Where the reverberations come is when you get home. You can be shook up during a call, and you can, let your partner know a little bit about what's going on, and that would come out something like, boy, that was a tough one. But then you go home alone at night, and that's where you have some very important choices to make. You can either face what you experienced and try and work through it a little bit, or you can avoid it, or you can go into denial, or you can lubricate yourself with alcohol, or any number of avoidance techniques. So the big problem is that there's no one out there teaching medics how to work through this stuff with each other. It's not a part of the culture, like we already spoke about. It's a culture of silence, and medics are left to suffer alone and figure it out on their own. And that's what, cumulatively, that builds up, and it drags a lot of medics down.
Russ, what are some of the changes in the medical profession, let's say in the last 50 years, from hands-on caring into a litigation-driven, corporate-controlled, impersonal machine?
When I was growing up in Brooklyn in the 1950s, medical care was, or taking care of the sick and injured, ill and deformed, debilitated, was something that was somewhat evenly spread out of the extended family. That if a family member were to get ill, the aunts and uncles would gather from all over the 5 boroughs, and they would come down, and somebody would do the cooking, another the cleaning, and somebody would take care of some recipes or home remedies or folk remedies. But generally, the family was there, and the extended family was there, and people had somewhere to turn in their immediate environment. If things got really bad, a doctor would make a house call. All of these things were about connection. All of these things were people reaching out for help and then finding some people to get them through that trauma. Well, as the years have gone by, medicine has gotten out of the hands of the general populace, that we've believed in the shamanism of the physician and give them all the power when it comes to healing us. And the physicians have grouped together in these large institutions that we call hospitals. And that seems to be the only place that you can go now. As the hospitals have become more and more complex, and especially in the United States, litigation-driven, they've become institutions, and the personal connection is gone. And that drives a lot of people to emergency rooms because they are looking for some sort of connection with someone who cares and that will take care of them, when all of this used to be held up by the community at large.
What type of personal litigation possibility are you as an EMS or a first responder faced with every time that you go out and respond to a call?
Well, you know what? First, to clarify, I've been out of the field since 1985, but I'm keeping track of what's going on in the industry with the medics today through EMTlife.com, where I'm a community leader. And the interesting thing about that is that the medics are always talking about fear of litigation, but the actual amount of litigation that goes on is minuscule. Very rarely is a medic pulled out and sued, and I don't even know of one successful lawsuit, really, against a medic in the process of doing their duty. So really, it's an atmosphere of fear, in my impression, because it really doesn't happen that very much. There are, in the United States in particular, Good Samaritan laws that will protect a medic while they're off duty if they should intervene in an accident or medical emergency, up to the level of their experience and ability to perform. So I see a lot more fear than I see reality, but when you hear of just one case of somebody initiating a lawsuit that goes nowhere, of course everybody freaks out.
Is there an abuse of the emergency medical services, Russ?
They use abuse is a word that's commonly used, but in the United States in particular, I would say that maybe that's not quite accurate, because the system is set up that there's only one place that you can bring your patient, and that's the emergency room. And the emergency room once was geared towards very serious life and death situations. Now they're pretty much for whatever ails you. And many of the things that people flock to emergency rooms for are things that they could take care of themselves. I mean, such a common occurrence is a baby having a fever. People don't know what to do. They just don't have a handle on that, and there isn't the larger community support that will help. And, this is a very simple thing. We can take care of it like this, but they don't know what to do. They call 911, and they end up taking the kid to the hospital. We would call this abuse, but I see it more as the emergency rooms are not being specialized in emergency anymore, and they're being overdosed with patients that have nowhere else to go because we haven't set up secondary facilities.
But is this actually affecting the quality of life and medical care as well as the cost to the patient when it comes time to pay the bill?
Oh, completely, completely, because the emergency rooms are so often bogged down by non-emergent cases, chronic cases. When I was a medic back in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of people out in the world that were just kind of dropping dead. They were having a lot of acute illnesses, and they were just keeling over, and we would intervene on the streets. Now, with pharmacology growing the way it has, and medications going toward maintenance of people, so what medics are dealing with are a lot of chronic illnesses, a lot more chronic than acute illnesses, and that is what the emergency rooms are being dealing with. And because of the expense of this, prices are going up, so it's astronomical to make a visit to an emergency room now.
What are some of the medical techniques that you used to use to save lives that are now extinct?
The ironic thing is that as I was going through the last version of my book, I decided to check into the EMT world. This is about 5 years ago. And going through the list of drugs that they used, I was amazed to find out literally 90% of the drugs that I used to save lives in 1980 have been debunked, that they're not using them anymore, that they did not produce what are called good patient outcomes. In fact, what they would do is act as a temporary replenishment of energy, but the rebound effect of that adjustment would throw the patient into a more chronic state, making their quality of life much, much worse. And we didn't know that at the time. 25 years have gone by, and then they're looking at these medications, and they've taken most of them out of the drug box of paramedics. And yet I saved lives with these drugs. That I feel confident that at certain points I was able to save lives. But modern science has debunked so many of them. It's been astounding. Let's put it this way. They even took the A and B out of the A, B, C's of CPR. There's no more airway. There's no more breathing. It's all circulation. And that was the way things were done back there, was breaths and airway and circulation as an integral part of it, and then you pump them full of epinephrine and then sodium bicarbonate and more epinephrine, and then defibrillate over and over and over again. No more epinephrine, no more sodium bicarbonate, no more lidocaine to calm down an irritable heart. These have all been found to produce negative long-term effects.
Unreal. Russ, please stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation Russ Reina is our special guest. He's the author of Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic, A Healer's Rebirth. A couple of websites, www.russreina.com, that's RUSSREINA.com, and www.firetender.org. Russ and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Exonation, Russ Reina is our special guest. We're talking to Russ about his book entitled Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic, A Healer's Rebirth, and two websites, www.russreina.com and www.firetender.org. Russ, what was it like for you as a paramedic working in the back of an ambulance, basically at times having a tug of war with God?
That is, all of that is a subjective experience that I had that other medics do occasionally hint at.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that you're out there and you arrive on the scene, a patient is dead, you start intervening, and the patient starts to come back, and then all of a sudden something goes sour, blood pressure drops again, or pulse stops again, and then you're working on the void trying to bring them back, and then all of a sudden, you have success, and just before you get to the hospital, the patient crashes again. So it does literally feel like a tug of war in that the Creator wants that patient dead, and you get to the scene and you say, no, I'm going to save that life, and you work on it. You put your heart and soul into it, and use the best that technology has to offer, and then God takes another round, and then all of a sudden things can switch, and you become the victor, and then 3 days later you find out that the patient died anyhow. You're caught between. It's a very challenging place to be, to not subjectivize it and make it to feel like it's personal. And that's one of the things that a lot of medics have to face out there is this is not personal. It's not a war between me and God. that God is, however you would determine that, is relatively indifferent when it comes to that, and everybody passes on. But when you're in the midst of it, it often does feel like that.
I was wondering if you as a paramedic have ever had any experiences or come across something that just seems out of this world. For example, I've talked to members of the first responders in Canada, the United States, and a couple of them have told me stories that can only be classified as angelic intervention. And I was wondering if you had ever had any of these type of experiences or heard of any.
Well, one of the things that I had to deal with about being a paramedic is that kind of medicine, that stuff is so very grounded. Mm-hmm. And then around it happens some very strange stuff that you can only sit back and wonder. One call that comes to my mind is that one day these two twin sisters were jogging along the beach not too far from Daytona Beach in Florida. And what is called a rogue cloud. I mean, basically in Florida you would have a completely clear sky, very wispy clouds way off in the distance, and all of a sudden you would see a dark cloud coming from out of nowhere. It's small, relatively confined, and it would go along, and then it would send down a lightning bolt out of nowhere. I've heard of those phenomena at one time or another, but at one point, one of our ambulances was responding to a call where two twin girls were jogging along the beach. A rogue cloud came, a lightning bolt came out and struck one of them dead. The ambulance got onto the scene, and the medics were not aware that there were two twin sisters jogging and one being affected. So the paramedic was in the back, and he's doing CPR on the twin, and then all of a sudden, as he's doing CPR on her twin comes at the back and puts her face there, and he's looking down at the face of the girl that he's working on, and he's looking at the back door, and there is the face of that same girl. And he was pretty shook up for a long, long time. But we do see things, I mean, just the rogue cloud alone, but the idea of what do you do with that information that you're sitting there and you're going, my God, these are twin sisters. They're jogging right next to each other, and a lightning bolt comes out of nowhere and strikes one dead. What do you do with that? How do you reconcile that? That's something that turns into a lifelong puzzle.
When somebody, I'm sure that on many of the calls that you were responding to, the people were either had passed or were at death's door. Has anybody ever given you their dying confession as you've responded to these calls?
Very good question. One of the chapters of the book, the last chapter, is called Last Words. And my experience is very few last words pass out of people's mouths. That, the most devastating experience I had ever had of that was a young man that was basically had his leg amputated by an oil rig, by the counterweight of an oil rig. And as we were all struggling to save the kid's life, on the way into the ambulance, he looked up at me and he said, "I'm cold." And that was it.
Wow.
Nothing philosophical, nothing. And then he lost consciousness. And that's been my general experience with last words, that people really, when you're dying, you don't have a whole heck of a lot of energy to philosophize about anything or to pass on any information. That's largely something that you see in movies and read in books to move the plot forward.
How different are the actual responding to a call compared to those that we see on TV?
That's an interesting question because the reality shows, of course, they show all the action of a call. Mm-hmm. Now, the part that I felt it was important, I think it's important for the public to understand what the medics go through inside, and that is what is not portrayed. It's hardly portrayed in books about the industry by medics themselves. They still keep with that kind of macho attitude and relate the calls, and they're interesting, but the internal stuff is kind of missing. I did see a show produced about New Zealand paramedics, and they incorporated into that the emotional lives of the medics as they were going. It's very, very rare to see. But I'm hoping that I'm just one part of a little movement that will make the public more aware so that they can help support medics as they get the help that they need to deal with these kind of traumas.
What about, I understand that the majority of motor vehicle accidents have a lot of head injuries, and that some of the head injury horrors that medics and EMTs and first responders see are just unbelievable.
That's completely true. Head injury, the one scene that comes out in my mind was responding to a multiple vehicle accident, and as I was taking care of some minor people, the medics in the ambulance in front of me were struggling with a guy who had part of his head ripped off. He actually had brain matter visible, and he was fighting with them. It looked like something out of Frankenstein. It was just absolutely horrific. And then you have to ask yourself, what is this miracle called the brain? What happens when you take it out? Mm-hmm. What happens when you damage it severely? What is left? What is left of that person? And we see that quite a bit, and it's questions that we all ask ourselves, but the questions don't go any further.
Throughout your years as an EMT, what is the most memorable moment that you can share with us?
I was called out into the boondocks of Florida, and we were called for a woman possibly delivering. And everywhere that we turned, we made the wrong turn. It took us about 20 minutes to get to the house. We finally got to the house. We burst in the door, and then in the middle of the kitchen floor is a woman in a pool of blood, and she has an ecstatic smile on her face, and she's holding her baby that she just delivered herself. And she said, "Sorry, you guys are too late. I just had to take care of it myself." And I'll never, ever forget the incredible expression on that woman's face, the joy of delivery. I never saw anything more beautiful in my life, yeah.
Did you remain in contact with any of the people that you attended to as an EMT?
Not, in 12 years of, when I lived in Florida, it was a one ambulance town. We had an ambulance, a house that we lived in, and then the town was in our care. And we were like the golden boys of the town. And for the 5 years that I was there, I really did get to know quite a few of my patients. And we participated in their lives. I mean, I was even pallbearers at funerals of people that had no one to be pallbearers at. It was a very intimate experience. But when I moved away from Florida and got involved in Santa Barbara, California, it was more, spread out, so that I didn't have that kind of contact. And as far as twice in my career did a patient whose life I had saved ever make an effort to find out who I was and to thank me. So there's very little, very, very little follow-through interaction and even less thanks.
About how many runs did you do as an EMT?
How many runs?
Yes. How many calls did you respond to?
Oh my gosh! Well, I had a career of 12 years,
yeah.
So it could be anything from areas where there are 3 to 5 calls a week to areas where I'm running maybe 10 calls a day in a 24-hour shift, 10 plus. I've worked days where I've run 20 calls in 24 hours. When I worked, we were on 24-hour shifts, so it'd usually be 24 on, 24 off, or 48 on, 48 off, or 72 on, 72 off. So it could get quite crazy.
But if you're a responder and you're responding to more than 10 calls in a shift, doesn't that play on your ability to perform your duties with the utmost professionalism?
Oh, totally. Well, the sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
Emergency medical services people are in the top 5 of all professions with sleep deprivation. It's a reality of the field. I mean, you just got to go out there and perform. Now, when you talk about second wins and third wins and even catching your fourth win in the field, sometimes that's what happens, and sometimes it also puts you into a very strange zone, where your body just kind of gives up and something else takes over, and it seems to move through you and work with you, and you start doing things that you didn't even know that you were trained for. That is an experience that I've had a couple of times where, especially during an exhausting 24-hour shift, where I've been on the move for 18 of those hours, come across a very critical situation, and I'm really not there. I kind of disappear, and my body just takes care of everything on its own. It's like something much greater is moving through me.
Russ, stand by, my friend. You and I have to take our final break here. Fascinating story. Great having you with us, Russ. And congratulations on a great book, Moments in the Death of a Flush Mechanic, A Healer's Rebirth. A couple of websites, Exo Nation, www.russreina.com and www.firetender.org. Russ Reina and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
19 Sergeant Central. 19 Sergeant, check. Officers on the scene.
Hi, I'm Larry Lawson, host of Paranormal Stakeout. With over 36 years in law enforcement, I have learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, UFOs, and extraterrestrials, how we gather the evidence, preserve that evidence, and present it to a jury of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Join me, Larry Lawson, every week on Paranormal Stakeout when, along with my guests, we'll take a journey to prove with indisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Go to xzbn.net for the broadcast schedule and check me out at paranormalstakeout.com.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, Soul Balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A Soul Balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today, www.soulbalancing.world.
Exonation, Russ Reina is our special guest. His website is www.russreina.com. That's www.russreina.com and www.firetender.org. Russ is the author of Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic, A Healer's Rebirth. And first of all, Russ, thanks very much for being with us. It's been a great hour, and thanks for sharing some of the stories that you have shared with us over the past hour. Russ, what is the final word that you'd like to leave with the X-Zone Nation tonight?
Well, I have to say that I wrote the book to work out some of my own experiences, and the end product of that turned into something where I realized that I was at a very pivotal time of medicine, that transition from hands, head, and heart over to mechanically driven, litigation driven, pharmaceutically controlled medicine. And the story that I told turned into a metaphor of this big change in medicine where people, both the patient and I think the practitioners to a certain degree, kind of lost touch with that. And a lot of the conflicts that I was dealing with is how am I going to continue to be a human being in the back of an ambulance taking care of people that need my help versus dealing with all this technology, dealing with all these machines, dealing with all these drugs, dealing with all of these directives that I'm put to do, that I'm forced to do. And that is the central conflict, and I think that the end work, it actually has surprised me a little bit because it really does come in at a place in time when all of this was changing. And there I was, a guy stuck in the middle of it, and the book ended up to be writing about that, and I think that's instructive for everybody. People need to understand a little bit better about what it means to be in the skin of a paramedic, so that maybe they'll consider, rather than calling for that little sore throat and have medics come over, that they'll make an appointment with the doctor tomorrow and lessen the load on the field.
Russ, so we've come to the end of our hour. Again, thank you very much. Once, let our listeners know how they can get a copy of your book, Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic, A Healer's Rebirth.
You can get it directly through russreina.com and also Amazon and Barnes & Noble for your Canadian listeners, Amazon CA, Barnes & Noble CA. Would be able to have that. Just ask for Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic, Healer's Rebirth.
Russ, thanks very much for being on the show, and to all the EMTs and first responders, thank you for being there for us. Take care, Russ.
Aloha, Rob.
Aloha. That's it with our guest of this hour, Russ Reina. Once again, he is the author of Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic, A Healer's Rebirth, www.russreina.com or www.firetender.org. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past as the X-Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.